chapter 12 of Luke. Luke is, let's remember this, Luke is writing for a post-Easter audience. We can't put that fact aside even for a moment. He's writing to a people who have heard the stories spoken of Jesus, the Gospels of Jesus, spoken in groups by apostles, by teachers, by second or third generation teachers at this point in time, who have spoken of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, and for their benefit and the benefit of those generations who would come after he's gone and after those people immediately in front of him are gone, for their benefit, Luke is now putting these stories together in a consistent form, an orderly fashion, as he called them. So the stories of Jesus that Luke tells and arranges in a particular way and shared by him, so these new groups of people here and there around the Mediterranean who are new believers and new followers of the Jesus story, many of them, Luke is writing these things down so these people may know what it is that will mark them in the world. Mark them as disciples in the world. How will following Christ make them different? Make them want to be followed and be in community with others who also want to or are following Jesus. Luke chapter 12 is a collection of those instructive sayings, those teachings by Jesus. We could call this chapter, "Here's how to be a follower of Christ in such a way that others will want to be followers of Christ too." The crowds are getting bigger. Both the crowds that Luke is writing about, the ones who are hearing and seeing Jesus, but also the crowds that Luke is writing to, the ones joining this movement, the new Christian movement, years later. Some of the Jesus teachings in chapter 12 are harsh. Don't give yourself over to the ways of God, and your legacy will end up in the always burning trash fires outside of Jerusalem, Jesus said. Gehenna was the word that Jesus actually used, which was the name of the Jerusalem city dump. Later translators made that word Gehenna into the word hell, which had its own set of meanings. The writer Dante then, in the 1300s, the 14th century, would describe this hell in extraordinary detail. And it is his descriptions, not those of Jesus, which continues to terrify many people into living their Christian lives in sheer and abject terror. Well, you may accuse me of glossing over that part of chapter 12, but I'm going to anyway, because I want to get to some of my favorite verses in all of the Bible. They begin at verse 24, and if we follow Dante into his inferno, we won't have time for them, so we're not going to mess with them. But first, we're going to begin at verse 13. Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." The rabbi, once upon a time in Israel, was the go-to guy for settling arguments or coming to a final word for squabbling family members. Just like it's the same office that priests and preachers held throughout much of history. You think even here in America, the old churches that put this pulpit up on a pole very, very high above all of you who needed the answers and the authority of the preacher or the priest. Verse 14. But Jesus said to him, "Friend, Who set me to be a judge or arbitrator over you? It was not a role that Jesus wanted or accepted. So that's point number one here today. Jesus is not a set of rules. He's a human in whom God's reflection, power, and love can best be seen. To reduce him to the role of a judge is literally to take his name in vain. Verse 15 through 21. And Jesus said to them, "Take care, be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." Then he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly. And the man thought to himself, "What should I do? For I have no place to store my crops." And then he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they end up being?' So it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich toward God." Jesus was not, and he does not ever condemn the having of riches, the having of wealth. But he had nothing good to say ever about the hoarding, the attachment to stuff. The man in the parable has his own bootstraps. He's pulled them up and up and up and up. And that's all he needs. He feels no need for community, family, friends, or the love of God. Greed is the moral antithesis of generosity. The thought of what the man might be able to do for or even with others never enters his mind. If compassion ever dwelled in his heart, greed has long ago squashed it. Until the voice of God interrupts this rich fool's solitary song, there is nothing, until that interruption, there is nothing in the man's life except his possessions. This is where and when Jesus transitions from parable to object lesson. Verse 23. He said to his disciples, and when you hear that phrase, you can kind of think, kind of looking around, come in closer here. He said to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body is more than clothing. Consider the ravens, consider the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouse nor barn, yet God feeds them. Of how much more value are you than the birds? And can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your span of life? If then you are not able to do as small a thing as that, why do you worry about the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin, yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not clothed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is alive today and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, you of little faith? And do not keep striving for what you are to eat and what you are to drink, and do not keep worrying. For it is the nations of the world that strive after all these things, and your Father knows that you need them. Instead, strive for his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well." Jesus is here directing his disciples to the millions of years old works of God. That is the first and oldest Bible, after all. The works of God, creation itself. The works of God is not so much about specific words as it is about the rhythms. It's not about the words of the song, it's about the music itself. Take a look around yourself today. From winter's tomb, from winter's bare and cold earth, and from stark branches and twigs, resurrection, life renewed, is happening right now. Bulbs that have lain hidden now reach with lavender and magenta and golden fingertips toward the sun. Once again, they are on photosynthetic fire, burning bushes, proclaiming to all of creation, I am that I am. Worried about an investment, yesterday's mistakes, a child in rebellion, and illness? Can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your span of life? Life goes on in spite of our worrisome desires and forlorn fantasies that we can stop the clock or turn time backwards. The coyote's call is the sound of continuing creation. The owl's nightly exuberations are affirmation that life goes on. The grape hyacinth and the dogwood, free of any human care or concern at all, sing petal by petal in the joyful song of eternity. Green rises now in the dormant and brown switchgrass of the meadow. And this week, just watch them. The trees will turn day by day deeper and deeper from tinge of green to dark and heavy green splendor. The rabbits and squirrels and raccoons and possums are gathering food for babies we'll never see. But that doesn't matter, does it? God said, despite you, despite me, God said, that's good. Verse 32, do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give alms. Make purses for yourselves that do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven where no thief comes near and where no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also.